Ladies and gentlemen, all the way from Dallas, Texas, it's the Yankee Cowboy Podcast with your host, Tim Wilkins, where he talks all things pro wrestling and sports. Let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. I'm joined by the co-host of co-host, Christopher, joining me once again. And we got a topic that we kind of need to discuss and not really recap, but we're like discuss. It's been like 2 weeks, but Chris, I think you can agree, but we missed out on some fun in Phoenix that we need to recap at the NASCAR Xfinity in NASCAR Winston. Sorry, I should not say Winston Cup Series because I'm thinking so much about nostalgia from like 25 years ago, how great NASCAR was until the shit show it was until this last race. In the Xfinity Series race as well, the championship was decided at Phoenix. But Chris, I appreciate the co-host joining me once again. We got a lot of good stuff to talk about. I think we do. It's NASCAR. It's the follow-up. It's the championship. Congratulations to Joey Logano and Ty Gibbs on their championship. But we got some things to discuss, my friend.
Can't forget Zane Smith too, the Truck Series.
Oh yes, good old Zane, man, the young prodigy there in the Truck Series. At least he wasn't, good old Carson Hocevar, and makes me be in a dumpster fire down there too. So it was.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it here. There's so much to talk about that's happened the last 2 weeks. I think we should start with the Xfinity Series because I think there was a lot that transpired throughout the week prior, the week race before with Martinsville, Mr. Ty Gibbs, believing he was close to Jesus and he could walk on water and all that fun biblical stuff that he was speaking about after wrecking his teammate there to advance to the championship. And then Phoenix happened, which it was basically a 3-on-1 fest, and minus what you think about Ty Gibbs and his personality complex, the man can wheel a race car. And we saw that firsthand. And I thought Noah, I don't know about you, Chris, but I thought Noah was hauling. They were coming, but they just ran out of time at the very end of that race. But Noah was going to beat him. You can catch him, but you got to pass him. And I don't know if that was going to be able to happen. So I want to see your thoughts on the Xfinity side. Obviously, we'll talk about the tragic events that happened after the win, but I think obviously the events of the race itself has to be talked about more than anything else.
Yeah, I think we'd obviously be remiss not to send our condolences to the entire Gibbs family, Ty and Joe on the passing of Coy Gibbs there on Sunday following Ty's win and locking up the Xfinity Series championship. But in terms of the race, I mean, just you got to give credit to that 54 team. You got to give credit to a young kid like Ty to be able to put the noise, basically the noise of the past almost 6-7 days that he had to hear and put it behind him and run undoubtedly probably, if not the best race of his career. I mean, had, if not the best car all day, really was a battle between he and Noah Gragson and Justin Allgaier. Josh Berry wasn't as much of a factor as I think we maybe thought he would be. But definitely his ability to really put the noise out of his head and focus there at the end. And yes, when those last 25, 30 laps, Noah was catching him, but him maintaining that gap, working his way through lap traffic, and ultimately bringing home his first Xfinity Series title. And as we might touch on later in the episode, now worst kept secret in the Cup Series, but now him making the move up full time into the Cup Series for JGR in 2023.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, I talked about it in the last episode about this topic of the Championship 4, was that he's going to move up to the Cup Series at some point, but these guys are going to give him little to no respect. And I think I have to kind of wind that back a bit because after listening to what a lot of of the veterans, even the guys that have retired, the Hall of Famers, including Dale Jr., talk about it, is that after the win of the championship, the events that happened after that win, you feel bad in a sense of, I would say, sympathy comes to process, but I still don't like it. As a person, some of the things that he has done on the racetrack is borderline worthy to just get parked for a while. But as a man, you kind of go, I feel for you, kid, because you lost your father. I feel for you. But until you, as a race car driver, you're still going to piss me off. And until you learn how to grow up a little bit, which I think Dale Jr. said it best, you kind of have to give him a little bit of a leash. But I don't know how much of a leash I'm willing to give him. And I think, I don't know how to speculate on this too much, but the passing of his father is tragic in itself, because that is the second son of Coach Gibbs, obviously the owner of Joe Gibbs Racing, who lost his other son at the very same age to a neurological disease. And this one, I don't think we're ever going to know, Chris. I don't want to speculate too much on personal health, but I don't think we're ever going to really know what happened there.
No, but
I think it's tragic enough as it is. It's sad as the fact that the picture. One of the pictures I think you saw it too, Chris, was one of the pictures got posted on social media of him and his father and his mother next to the trophy of the winning of the driver of the championship, and it was posted at like midnight, which obviously on the East Coast, which all intents and purposes to people that don't understand this, Phoenix doesn't have daylight savings time. They're not that far behind Central. I think they're about maybe someplace they're an hour behind Central Time, not 2 hours. So it was relatively early in the evening that picture was taken. And obviously, I'm not sure if Coy Gibbs flew back to the Charlotte, North Carolina area, or did he stay in Phoenix? I don't know all the details of that. But I do know is that they found out pretty damn early in the morning, because I think it hit the social media spot probably around 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning Central Time. Chris, I think the time frame was that he was not racing that day. So, as a time frame, I said the speculation started, there was a lot of it on social media, especially Twitter, that said, it was a family emergency and his father passed away. And I was sitting there going, I'll wait and see. I'll have the wait and see approach. And the reason why I bring this up is going into the Cup Series championship, when you have a tragedy of that nature, and you got, I believe it's Ty Gibbs, his cousin, was pitting the 20 car at the time. I think I could be wrong with that.
that's correct.
That is correct? Okay. And he was pitting the 20 car. You got all the Gibbs guys, including Kyle Busch, who's wrapping up his tenure at Gibbs, who knows Coy Gibbs, obviously. I think had a lot to do with the negotiations to keep Kyle Busch around. Okay, I don't know all the back behind the scenes stuff, and neither does any fan, but there was definitely a lot of dark cloud over the track when that happens. But really, when you think about it, and this is transitioning over to the Cup win by Joey Logano, it really, like it was I would say this right now, Chris, you can agree or disagree with me on this later, is that the Joey Logano performance was dominant from start to scratch. Start to finish was the most dominant car in the field, and it was like Joey Logano basically said, come on, boys, come and get it. You ain't going to get me. You ain't going to beat me. And basically just, I would say, a grown man amongst boys out there. And he just did it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you figure also, Joey was kind of in the catbird seat as it relates to the way the playoffs won. He locked himself in by virtue of winning in Las Vegas, the first race in the round of 8. So essentially, Paul Wolf, and that whole 22 team had basically two full weeks to prepare for Phoenix. They're all their focus, and Joey alluded to in interviews leading in that, and even after the fact that, while they were obviously competing in the remaining 2 races, that there was a significant amount of time that was also spent each and every day focusing on what Phoenix would look like. So when you look at the way that and obviously Joey, Joey's driving the race car, the crew, the pit crew, everyone did their job, but huge kudos to crew chief Paul Wolf, his ability to use that 2 weeks in and of itself to make sure that he and Joey and that whole team was prepared um, to race in Phoenix for that championship. I mean, tremendous. In fact, I was reading a stat that actually Joey over the 312 laps of that race was in the championship lead for 311 laps. So there was only one lap in that entire event that Joey was not the highest running of the Champ Four guys. And between
And
he,
I think that one lap was going into stage 2. Was they pitted, or I think either stage 2 or stage 3 when some of the guys stayed out or took 2
it
tires.
was the state it would have been stage 2 going to stage 3 when Chase Elliott and a few guys decided to choose to split the stage, which by virtue of doing that, they needed less fuel on the stage 2 caution pit stop. So they basically leapfrogged the 22 car there. So that was effectively the only lap that the 22 car was not in the lead. There was by virtue of the 9 pitting, but then needing less fuel when he came down pit road under the stage 2 brake. So
And
that
I think I don't know your view on this. I didn't want to touch base too much on the Coy Gibbs stuff because it's just not. But I think we would be remiss not to mention as an organization that's pretty difficult. But they went through that same, I would say, process with when they lost JD, which even Hamlin had alluded to in press releases since then. That it's a lot different. It's a little bit more. I would say there was a different bond between McCoy and the other 2 guys that were there, between Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin. So to me, it definitely, not saying it took a damper on the race, but you kind of have to understand as an organization going forward, that organization is going to be a little bit different as a thing. You alluded to something that I think I've totally forgot about, and with this new car, is that there still needs to be a setup involved. As a lot of people think about this car being a stock on stock car where it's all OEM parts, it's not as much tinkering with like the other cars have been in the past. You can definitely tell, though, all the information on the radio that Joey Logano was getting definitely facilitated a lot of results, which I think, even with, I could be wrong, did they switch spotters this year as well, Chris?
No, he's had last year he switched spotters towards the end of the year. He had TJ Majors with him, and then he and Brad Keselowski switched spotters to with now Joey finishing up his second season with Coleman Presley. So
Yeah.
but yeah, between that whole group there, I mean, obviously a very experienced team. I mean that 22 team was by virtue essentially the old number 2 team that was with Brad Keselowski when he won the Cup championship in 2012. So they've been in that moment and know how to handle a moment like that. And one of the things that Joey alluded to in interviews as well, with but he, Chase Elliott, both being obviously champions, former champions in the Cup Series, but then having 2 first timers, Ross Chastain and Christopher Bell, in the Final Four with them. Their mindset was treat it like any other race. Joey, being the veteran that he is, even though he's only 32 years old, said, no, this is not like any other race. You have to realize what's at stake. And has obviously he's a 2-time champion, but he's been on the losing end of potentially winning 2 additional championships. You go back and look at 2020, he was probably one good chains away from winning a championship there. And you go back to 2016 when the jack broke on his last pit stop. So if you look at those, I know we can't live in the era of shoulda, woulda, couldas, but when you have that experience, I mean, we can allude to it in sports, like when a team goes to the Super Bowl for the first time. When you've got a veteran who knows what it's like to be on that gridiron on Super Bowl Sunday, and but you're going against a team that says this is going to treat it like any other game, and it's simply not like any other game. And I think that's where the veteran mindset of a guy like Joey Logano is just so dangerous. Obviously, things worked out.
Now, I think Chris will be remiss to talk about this, but the Chase Elliott, I would say, scenario towards the end of that race where he got leaped for, they pitted under green, try to split, basically that whole transpired. Was I under understanding that he was trying to out pit sequence Logano, and it came back and bit him there a little bit, or is there another? And then there was a mechanical issue, wasn't there?
Well, according to the broadcast, they were going to be short on fuel. Or fuel was going to be an issue for the nines. They figured if we split the stage basically in half, it leaves us vulnerable if the caution comes out. But obviously, on fresher tires, we can gain a lot of time back. And then by virtue of that, because now with the single lug pit stops, the tires putting tires in the car takes a lot less time than it is to get fuel in it. So the guys who ran the whole stage, like Logano and I believe Bell, those two who ran the stage to their conclusion and did not pit, were needed to basically waiting on fuel on pit road. So kind of a strategy move there, to gain that track position, that by virtue of the 22 and the 20 needing to sit and wait for fuel on their pit stop there. But obviously, Chase's day came to obviously his ability to stay in contention ended on that restart there when he and Ross got together when they were coming through the dog leg. And by all intents and purposes, after watching replays, it would appear obviously it was a racing incident, but the 9 went down there and was trying to close the hole, and the 1 was in there and said, "I'm not lifting." So unfortunately for Chase, that basically ended any chance of him winning the championship.
Yeah, I just, Chris, I don't mean to stop you there, but I think the Chastain move was probably one of the most difficult ones there to watch because it was, I race on iRacing this track, and it's probably one of the most mind-numbing tracks there is because of that dog leg. Everybody likes taking it. Everybody takes the shortest part around the track, but it pisses everybody off because there's no, I call it, due diligence when you come back to the racetrack. And the restarts there are awesome to watch. They spray out and they come around that corner, and it's great to watch as a fan, but as a driver, it's fucking excuse my language. It is definitely all like, holy crap. Your brain is overwhelmed because there's so much going on. There's so much, spotters got to be perfect during that situation. But I will say this, going into that whole sequence of the last part of the race, and we're going to go into the off season here in a minute, is that, and I'll touch base on this, Logano did what he was going to do. You alluded to the adjective of the wary veteran. Tom Brady's been through enough Super Bowls where, yeah, he did lose 2, unfortunately, to those wary Giants, but he's been there. He's been through a lot of them. And a prepared driver, in this case, won a race because, also, not going to lie, he's pretty good there. He's pretty good at Phoenix, and he knows what he had to do there. The pit crew didn't really, I don't think, had a mistake on pit road all day. Had a little bit of a longer stop. I think once they had like an extra second, but it wasn't anywhere outside the realm of anything. And I mean that legitimately. And he won, obviously, the fun and eluded. Everyone had a great time. I will say I hope all the Penske employees got back to Mooresville, North Carolina at a reasonable time, sometime safe or form, and got some sleep after all those adult cervezas. But that being said, going into the off season, there was no doubt in my mind, Chris, that I think Ty Gibbs was going to go Cup racing. It was just a matter of when they were going to announce it. Now, obviously, with the death of his father, I think the timing was going to change a little bit. And they announced that he's going to drive the 54 for his namesake, And I kind of was taken aback by the fact that, I don't know about you, Chris, but the not using of the 18 car. And
Yeah.
I kind of want to get your view on that, because I believe the 54 is, yes, is it Gibbs? Is it? I think he was in that number for a while.
Technically, the 54 was actually a Kyle Busch Motorsports number when Kyle had started his when
Yeah,
Kyle
that's
had
the
had
Truck Series, right? Or you can't. I could be wrong.
Xfinity. Yeah, then was the Nationwide Series. So back in 2000 and I believe 2011 or 2012, Kyle effectively stopped driving a Joe Gibbs Xfinity car and started his own Xfinity team out of Kyle Busch Motorsports, and it was a Monster Energy car, and it was number 54. And they had very, very limited success with it. Kurt Busch actually won their first race as a KBM team at Richmond, actually in 2012, and then effectively they sold that that team back to Joe Gibbs Racing, and it became the 54 Monster Energy Toyota for Joe Gibbs Racing. So I actually did a little bit of research on it, and next year, if the number 18 does not run full time, it'll be the first time we have not had a number 18 car full time in the Cup Series since 1992 with Dale Jarrett, when Joe Gibbs Racing
Yeah.
first started. If you figure all the names who've driven that 18 car over the years, obviously Dale Jarrett was the first. He won Gibbs' first race, the 1993 Daytona 500. Bob Bilbani obviously won a Cup championship in the 18 car in the year 2000. J.J. Yaley drove it, and then Kyle Busch obviously was in the 18 car starting in 2008 up until his last race here in
And
Phoenix.
I think it's worth talking about too, Chris. At what point do you give this young man enough of a leash? Okay, obviously Daytona is Daytona, which is basically a crapshoot race no matter what happens in that situation. I mean, obviously it takes strategy, and yes, it does take. If you're there at the end, you take care of your car. You missed the big one, but at some point you're going to see the quality of talent inside the race car. I would say within the first 10 races, he's obviously driven with 2311, with Kurt being out, which going into the off season, NASCAR's really got to evaluate the car itself on a couple standpoints. I think we can talk about is if they don't make those changes, they're going to see a lot of drivers that are, I'm not saying older, but they're up in years on their racing tenure, walk away from the sport because they see guys like Kurt Busch. Bowman's a young enough guy where he got knocked, his head got rung. He's got his bell rung. No pun intended to him, but he was out. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, it led to Kurt Busch. Now we can speculate, Chris, as well, that Kurt Busch was going to retire anyway. But at the same time, we wouldn't know that scenario.
Yeah, and obviously NASCAR has said that they are, they're in the process of, especially it appears that the rear hits are the hits that are causing these injuries. So I know that, or at least I've read through stories that NASCAR is going to absorb the cost essentially of any type of redesign and then building of these new rear clips that appear to be the the part of the car that is too stiff. Um, looking towards 2023. So it would appear at least NASCAR from that perspective is working with the teams and the drivers to um, try and address the issue itself. Obviously, Ty Gibbs has. When it comes down, he's a champion. He's a champion now of NASCAR's second tier series, and he's made starts in the Cup Series and has shown some speed. And I think the talent's going to come there. It's just a matter of building that rapport and respect with your competitors. And I'm sure, as kind of the old adage is, respect is earned. So it certainly is not going to be easy for him. I think part of the move to put him in 54 as opposed to the 18 was potentially, I guess, twofold. It could have been a sponsor related thing, as Monster maybe wanted to keep the continuity of Ty with the 54, and he can kind of build his identity in that number. And and then maybe taking some of the pressure off and putting him in, the basically iconic 18 car, being that that's the flagship number of Joe Gibbs Racing. So I think there was maybe a twofold approach looking at it from perspective, keep giving him the 54 instead of the 18.
I hear you. I definitely. I mean, to me, it's one of those few. You're right about the 18 car. I mean, I was so used to. I think we grew up with the iconic Interstate Battery sponsorship on that 18 for such a long time. That green 18 car, and it was one of those things where Bobby Labonte did a hell of a job when we were kids to drive that car. Obviously, you talked about Dale Jarrett running that car as well, but I have to say, maybe I'm remiss here. I'm trying to think of any other driver that's making big moves. I think there's still some moves. John Hunter Nemechek, we still haven't discussed. Haley Deegan, plenty of drivers that have not
had a little bit of news this week today, especially on this Wednesday as we're taping. Stuart Haas essentially has basically announced their 2023 lineup with the move of taking their, I guess you could say, reserve driver Ryan Preece, who of course raced several years in the Cup Series for JTG Dory Racing, but has this past season kind of taken a step back and was doing a mixture of Cup races for Rick Ware Racing and basically a satellite car from Stuart Haas. Was running some Xfinity races, and then also a couple truck races for DGR, which he did score a victory earlier this year. But Ryan Preece joining Stuart Haas Racing to replace Cole Custer in the 41 car. Kind of a move that I think had to be agreed upon by both Gene Haas, who's been the major funder of that 41 car since they started that back for Kurt Busch, and then obviously Tony Stewart, who really the name face of the organization. So both of them coming to a decision there to opt to put Ryan Preece in that car full time next year, 2023, and then taking Cole Custer and moving him back down into the Xfinity Series full time, where he's got over 10 victories and had come close to winning a couple championships down there. Cole making the move back down to the Xfinity Series with joining Riley Herbst down there in the 98 car, who they announced will return next year. And then the questions obviously being hit, what will Haley Deegan be doing next year? Will she be in in a Ford, obviously being a Ford driver? Will she be in a Stuart Haas-esque Xfinity car, potentially as a third car? I guess time will kind of tell there, but obviously the big story being now is Ryan Preece now getting his second shot in the Cup Series now, and with an organization like Stuart Haas Racing.
I was gonna ask is would you see the writing on the wall with that happening with Cole Custer? I think I was maybe not say I was naive to that, but it obviously was results driven. I'm assuming that, or could be sponsor driven. Stuart, Gene Haas probably want that car to get covered by somebody other than himself and his paycheck here. But was I surprised with Cole Custer getting knocked out of his Cup ride? Absolutely. I think that was probably one of your biggest shakers and movers there. Is he close? Was he there? Sure, but I don't think it was directly his fault necessarily that he had the results that he had. It could have been a mixture of him and the team, a mixture of the equipment, the new car. It could be anything, but obviously a move had to be made. I felt maybe it was going to come from the crew chief, maybe the car chief, engineering side. But I want to hear your view on that one, because that definitely was a baffling decision. I'm still waiting on John Hunter Nemechek, that decision to ride out, as well as Haley Deegan, which she's driver for Ford. She only has so many spots open. The truck rides are starting to kind of dry up as well. So be interested to see what they do with her.
I think the challenge, obviously, well, first touch on John Hunter Nemechek. It would appear now that KB Kyle Busch Motorsports, now moving to Chevrolet, announced their 2023 lineup at Phoenix with their group, and John Hunter was not one of the drivers announced. So it would appear that, and this is strictly speculating, that potentially we could see if John Hunter indeed is going to stay with in the Toyota pipeline, I would imagine we either see him driving a truck for another organization, or potentially into a Joe Gibbs Xfinity car full time in 2023 now. And obviously with Ty Gibbs now making the move, that'll be the big question. Obviously, well, who would fund that program, as it would be in terms of Cole Custer. I mean, yeah, and people obviously some do know the story about Cole. Obviously, his father, Joe Custer, um, longtime confidant of Gene Haas, had vice president over at Stewart Haas Racing. So there's obviously a family connection there, and Cole obviously has won it at every level he's competed at. I think he had three full seasons in the Cup Series, did score a win at Kentucky Speedway in 2020, but aside from there, not a ton of success in the Cup Series, and really as a whole, Stewart Haas Racing has really kind of been feast or famine as it relates to their kind of driver lineup that they've had the last couple of years, and Cole's definitely been the fourth string of the lineup of their organization behind Kevin Harvick, Eric Almirola, Chase Briscoe. Uh, so I think the move is definitely twofold. I think it's an organizational move. I think it's also a move by the manufacturer that giving Ryan Preece a shot here. His second, obviously, as mentioned, his second chance in the Cup Series, and undoubtedly better equipment than what he had the first go around that he had in the Cup Series several years ago.
Oh, the question I have really about that move is Chase Briscoe is going to be the guy going forward in that organization once Kevin Harvick decides to hang up his head, or his shoes, and hang up his helmet for his career. But at the same time, you're seeing a huge trend now going towards younger drivers in these race car teams, but also the ones that have the manufacturer backing. Back in the day, Chris, maybe back in the early 2000s, up until the most recent car change, it was how much money you bring into the table to get you a ride. And you've seen that with other teams as well. Hell, even the startup of 2311 is how much money you can bring. You basically earn yourself a nice cup ride. But I'm kind of remiss to say this, but how much was that of Ford's doing other than Gene Haas saying, hey, listen, I funded this kid for 3 years at $20-30 million a clip. He's not bringing any sponsorship money. Now, how much is Ryan Preece bringing to the table? It'd be interesting to know who his sponsorship is going to be. But that's good. That's a good question. I think that we all need to kind of see what's going to happen. Did they announce any sponsorship for the Preece deal at all? Come with it?
Not that I've seen. I mean, I'd imagine it'll be heavily Haas funded or Haas sponsored race car, but maybe some other additional sponsors might pop up on the car throughout the year. But again, just knowing the kind of track record of the 41 car, it's been a Gene Haas heavily funded out of his pocket car. And again, as I mentioned before, that team was essentially started at the 41 car essentially started for Kurt Busch. But once Kurt had left, Suarez drove it, then Cole Custer. So we'll see what happens as time goes along. For sure.
Did I forget? Eric Almirola is retiring it still, right? He's not. He hasn't. Or that was last year that he retired. You there?
Oh, sorry, man.
Yeah. Did Eric Almirola retire this year or last year? I'm trying to remember.
So he was scheduled. This was scheduled to be his last season in the Cup Series, and he. I think a lot of it was heavily because of Smithfield Foods, but he basically re-signed I believe a 2-year extension to continue to drive in the Cup Series through 2024. But yeah, the original plan was that this was going to be Eric Almirola's last full-time season in the Cup Series, but I think there was some obviously some from a business standpoint, keeping that number 10 car funded was kind of contingent on Eric driving. So Eric is going to forego his departure at least for the next 2 years.
Okay, so that would make sense then on a business standpoint. I thought Eric was going to be out of sport entirely at the end of the season, and so that would change why Custer obviously would have to drop back in that sense, where maybe a slide over to the 10 car would have been a possibility if Eric was departing as planned. That would make sense. I mean, I think I told you, John Hunter Nemechek, in my opinion, is really the kind of the off-season move that I think a lot of fans want to know where he's going to end up. Haley Deegan is obviously going to have the fanboys chasing after her no matter what. But I'll be remiss to talk about it. She's running out of rides to jump into. With a lot of competitive rides that are in the Cup Series, or not the Cup Series, the Truck Series, excuse me. There's a lot of good drivers in the Truck Series that are vouching for really good rides. And her performance this season in the trucks, lack of a better word, was not so great. And she did drive the Xfinity car, did it pretty well her first time in it. But I don't know. Penske doesn't field an Xfinity ride anymore, from what I understand. There's only a handful left of Ford rides left. I could be wrong there. I'm trying to think of the other numbers that are out there for the Ford contingent out there on the Xfinity level.
Yeah.
Can you think of any?
Basically, Stuart Haas with their program, and then Ryan Sieg has his team, and then I think, and then there's the SS Greenlight team, but they're more or less kind of a back marker team. So yeah, Ford is Ford's Xfinity program, especially after losing. You figure you had two in just a short amount of time. You had two strong graduates up from the Xfinity program, being Austin Cindric and Chase Briscoe. So Ford almost is in a little bit of a proverbial rebuild, but also trying to figure out what's next for them. But again, they obviously, which we alluded to early in the show, have a really hot young prospect who just now is the Truck Series champion, Zane Smith, who I think they have big aspirations for. Hopefully in the Ford Motor Company, to continue to move him up the ladder and make him one of the faces of the Ford brand.
I'll be remiss to ask this though, Chris. Would Penske field two cars in the Xfinity level with those two drivers just listed, Zane Smith and Haley Deegan? Would that be a potential run? Because I don't think Penske's fielded a full-time Xfinity driver in probably quite a long time, wouldn't you?
Since Austin. Yeah, Austin was the last one last year. It would be. I think when it comes down to it, ultimately the business model from the Xfinity series is challenging. It is very hard to really, from a financial standpoint, run an Xfinity car. So I think there's always an opportunity for a Penske or a RFK, or I'll even throw some of the other Ford teams in there to field an Xfinity car. But the challenge is trying to make sure from a dollars and cents standpoint, it makes sense to do it.
And that's where that's where we talked about earlier, is how much money you're bringing to the table. And I think Hardingly, if those two drivers listed have a good sponsor that's willing to put themselves on a race car for a full season or even a half season, but then those two drivers are not going to. I mean, Zane Smith's going to obviously. I'm pretty sure he announced a return back to the same team in the Truck Series. Maybe I could be wrong with that, but I think he announced a full return. So if anything, he'll probably dabble in a part-time schedule in the Xfinity level more than a full-time situation, which will leave Deegan, which, like I said, the Ford rides in the Truck Series level are pretty much dried up on the competitive level. And so, not saying she made the mistake of jumping from Toyota to Ford, but with the move of Kyle Busch Motorsports going to Chevy, it changes everybody in the moving parts that go with it. I think she's going to drive. I think she's going to drive at the Xfinity level. It's just a matter of whose car, who's owning the race car.
Let me jump in here real quick. I think it was, if you look at it in totality, I think it was a good move, because what has happened, especially in that Toyota camp, is that there's not enough room at the end, essentially, for the amount of young drivers they have. So in a way, it was a smart move for her to jump to another manufacturer to allow her to have an opportunity. Um, but yeah, I think it's always a challenge when you're a heavily manufacturer covered driver to be able to position yourself, um, to continue to move up the ladder for sure.
I think I agree. I don't discredit the move in a sense. I discredit the fact that if foresight was a great thing to have, she had it. She saw the kind of the tunnel down the road. Um, her team and she did. She saw the kind of the light was on the end of the tunnel there. And with the amount of drivers that Toyota had in their system, what I think, and this is the reason why my point is that the KBM switch to Chevy left a lot of those drivers that were on the Toyota, you know, ladder of Toyota of drivers, kind of short. They're running out of seats in a sense. So
Oh, it's massive.
you're out of a seat in a sense where you can't really progress. Number one, not only being a competitive car, but being a car at all. And then so in her situation, I think, and I could be just speculating here, which I do like to do a lot, and like to cause drama and troll people at all times. I think she's gonna find a ride at the Xfinity level, and I think because of her sponsorship with Monster and her sponsorship from Ford, she's gonna be in a Penske ride eventually sooner rather than later. That or it's gonna be an RFK situation. RFK is gonna jump into the Xfinity Series and make a contract here. I think at some point she's not going to want to be in this low tier ride like the Ryan C. Nothing personal, Ryan, but your car it's not one of the top 4 manufacturer teams in the Xfinity Series. But she's not going to be in a JRM guy team. Obviously, she's not a Chevy driver, so you're running out of spots. And with Stuart Haas making the move that they did with Riley Herbst in that ride, and obviously Cole Custer going back, they're not going to field 3 cars. So with her, she's either got to make a really good deal and bring some serious, as we say, back home cojones to the table, and negotiate and bring a good table, because I think maybe I'm wrong, Chris, but I think the opportunity in the truck was a good opportunity for her to move up to get her experience level, but it was definitely not a good fit for her driver wise. I don't think it was a good fit. The Xfinity car, it's a whole different ball game, and it's definitely a different car all the way around. I think people kind of discredit or don't really understand the differences or the nuances between the truck series, and the way those drivers operate and the way those trucks handle compared to the Xfinity level and how those cars handle. It's a night and day comparison. I think I'm not saying she didn't get a fair shake, and I'm not going down this bandwagon for any reason other than just speculating here that the John Hunter Nemechek and the Haley Deegan announcement, whatever that is, going to be kind of a big thing. I think we won't know that till after Christmas. Your thoughts, sir?
I agree. I think, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, a truck. Again, I'm obviously not a driver. I mean, this is just looking at it from a 30,000 foot view. A truck, with the just the aerodynamics of it is completely different from driving an Xfinity car, which has a lot less aerodynamic advantages to it. So, I think there's drivers who take better to driving to drive an Xfinity car or driving a truck. It's just kind of depending on how that particular driver's feel for the vehicle is, for sure.
All right, everybody. This will wrap this one up, button this one up, and call it a day. Chris, I appreciate you joining me as always for this episode. Another fun-filled conversation of good times, and hopefully we'll have a good season start at Daytona. Better know the Great American Race. Hopefully, maybe old Sippy Cup will come around for a flyover. Who knows? Yeah, that's not going to happen. What did I say that for? But hey, who knows? Crazier things have happened at Daytona. Maybe an appearance by yours truly. Who knows? It is a Great American Race for a reason. But in Daytona, coming around the corner, I think we're going to have a lot of great news to talk about, Chris. I appreciate you joining me as always. Obviously, Ty Gibbs winning the Xfinity Series. Joey Logano, the champion in the Cup Series. A dominant performance at Phoenix. I'd be interested to see who gets the most popular driver award as well by vote. Hope everyone has a great night. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. Feel free to join us on social media to continue these great conversations and more.